Pokemon has 5 non-volatile status conditions that we generally associate with one specific type. So let's just quickly review that. We start off with Burn. Burn is obviously most strongly associated with the fire type. We have Freeze and Frostbite, which is of course ice. And then we have Paralysis. Paralysis can come from various sources, including things like Body Slam. But generally speaking, paralysis is thought of as an electric type status condition. Poison and badly poison, aka the toxic condition, are obviously from the poison type. And then sleep is actually the only type, or the non-volatile status condition that doesn't really have a type associated with it. There are normal type moves that can put you to sleep like Sing. There are a lot of grass type ones like Spore, Sleep Powder, and Grass Whistle. And then, of course, the psychic types have things like Hypnosis. So there's not really a strong contender for which Pokemon can put, or which Pokemon type puts things to sleep. I would argue it's Psychic, but that's just my Gen 1 bias with things like Hypno. So those are the 5 categories of non-volatile status conditions. And I just wanted to go over that because I do think it's important to recognize that each type generally, or each status condition generally has a type associated with it. So if we also think about status moves that cause these status conditions, that correlation becomes even more strong. The non-volatile status condition, or the status move that causes burn, is Will-O-Wisp. Right? There's no other status move that only inflicts burn, unless I'm forgetting something. And so you've got Will-O-Wisp, and that's it. That's a fire type move. Freeze does not have a status move associated with it. No move is going to ever be in Pokemon that just straight up gives you a chance to freeze your opponent, and that's it. If it did, it would be like, what, 30% accurate or something? Because freeze can just mean the death of a Pokemon if they get unlucky. It's very uncompetitive. And so there's not going to ever be a status condition, but one could imagine that if there were, it would obviously be ice. Paralysis, there are actually a couple of status moves that can do this. There's Thunder Wave first and foremost, and then of course there is Glare. But Glare is not very well distributed. It's a snake type move only. And so really it's just Underwave, which is of course electric. Poison, you have things like Poison Powder, which I suppose are grass type, but really the main poisoning status move is Toxic. And of course that inflicts badly poison as opposed to normal poison. If you want to get technical, Smog would be the one for poison. But badly poison is the main poison condition that people would go for, and that's Toxic. Sleep, as previously mentioned, does not have a strongly associated typing. So now let's talk about what moves burn. And there's the 2 main ones that this video is going to be centered around. You saw the title, you saw the thumbnail. So let's stop beating around the bush. Let's look at Lava Plume. Lava Plume is a very cool move because it can burn with a 30% chance, and it's a fire type move. But despite being a fire type move that can burn, there aren't a lot of fire types that actually learn it. Let's quickly just look at those Pokemon and see how many there are, how they learn it, and if they would even run it. So if we look at Bulbapedia, we're looking at Pokemon that can learn it by leveling up. We've got basically 1, 2, 3, and we're only looking at fully evolved. 4, we will count Hisuian Typhlosion is different. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Actually, 10 because I counted Magmar already. 11, 12, 13, 14. So unless I made a mistake here, there was 14 fully evolved Pokemon that can learn Lava Plume. And then we go down. Oh, that's it. That's all the Pokemon that can learn it. There's no Pokemon that gets Lava Plume by Egg move. That one is surprising to me. And there's no Pokemon that learn it by a move tutor because Lava Plume has never been a tutor move. Now let's go back and look at the typings of these Pokemon that learn Lava Plume. Fire, 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 fire. Everything's fire except for Groudon. And of course, Groudon can be fire type when it's primal, but ignoring that, Groudon is literally the only Pokemon on this list that is not a fire type. So, that's the distribution we've got here. There's fewer than 20 Pokemon that can learn it, fully evolved. And if we consider what Lava Plume is named in English and in Japanese, Volcanic Plume in Japanese, it would obviously make sense that Lava Plume would be strongly associated with Pokemon that are volcano adjacent or lava adjacent. So for Pokemon like Magmar, that makes sense. Magcargo, no problems. Entei is, every time it roars, volcanoes erupt, totally makes sense. Camerupt is literally a volcano Pokemon right there. Torkoal is sort of like that in a similar way and is found in a volcano. That makes sense. Groudon, no problems whatsoever with Groudon getting Lava Plume. It's a very volcano-y Pokemon. A Pokemon like Magmortar isn't really a lava Pokemon, but Magmar was in a volcano with Blaine, and I would say Magmar actually feels like a volcano Pokemon. The Magmortar feels less so, because Magmortar has this double flamethrower thing going on, but it's fine. Heatran, of course, lives in a volcano. Chiyu is this legendary fish that's entirely made out of fire. So it's not really found in a volcano, and I'm not really sure why it gets it, but I'm not hating. Gouging Fire gets it, of course, because it's just Entei again. So that's okay. Armarouge getting it and Ceruledge especially getting it is a little bit weird, I think. I'm not really sure why they would get it when it's a volcano thing. My best bet is that Charcadet gets it because its head is supposed to be like this little furnace thing, and then there's flames spewing out the top. So you could imagine that there's molten rock inside that helmet, but it's not really a strong association with lava or volcanoes. So I'm not really sure why Charcadet gets it. And then because Charcadet gets it, then Ceruledge will also get it, even though that doesn't make any sense. Armarouge getting it, well, that's basically Magmortar again, so I'm okay with that. Typhlosion, it learns Eruption. It's not really the strongest association with lava, but it's okay. I don't really have any issues with it. But I do want to point out that Flareon is on this list, and that's what we've been working up to here. Flareon is not a volcanic-looking Pokemon, and it is even weirder because all of these other Pokemon, if you look at them, except for maybe like Entei or a couple others, but most of the Pokemon, especially the ones that aren't actually volcano adjacent, have actual fire on them. Typhlosion has fire on them. Magmar has fire on them. And then all of these guys, even Ceruledge, has a literal flame. Chiyu's made out of fire. Flareon has no fire. Flareon just has fur that's sort of vaguely flame-shaped. And yet, Flareon learns Lava Plume. So you guys can take guesses as to why down in the comments below. I will say, of course, that Flareon, as one of the evolutions, is going to embody the element of the Firestone. However, we don't see the same thing being applied to Simisear. Simisear is another one of those Pokemon that's supposed to embody the element, and Simisear does not get it. And I think there are some other Pokemon that are of the fire type that maybe could get it. I mean, Charmeleon, Charizard, they have this flame on their tail. They could totally learn it. I wouldn't have any problems with that. Just quickly going down the list of other Pokemon, Simisear we already mentioned. Heatmore, I think, is the one I was looking at this originally that immediately jumped out at me. I feel like Heatmore should definitely get Lava Plume. That makes a lot of sense. I guess it's Cinderace getting it just because it's got like the fiery ball it kicks around. but I could also understand saying it shouldn't get it. But given the Flareon gets it, why not? Yeah, you can imagine Ho-Oh getting it just because it's a legendary, and you might as well give legendaries that. And Darmanitan could also get it because it has Zen mode, and Zen mode looks more magical. Let's see what else. Volcanion? Why wasn't Volcanion the Pokemon that's got Volk in its name? Why is that not on the list? Turtonator, I think, also could potentially learn it. Centiskorch, I think, should definitely learn Lava Plume. That's my opinion on that. And then going down the list some more. Oh yes, Colossal. If you say maybe Colossal is not hot enough, that, you know, obviously these rocks haven't melted yet, well, then that sort of mean the Colossal. Like, he should be able to produce hot flames just like any other fire type, and depending on how you invest it, it might have a stronger special attack stat than even the Flareon. So why can't Colossal get Lava Plume? I think that should be another one. Okay, so that was the list there. So there's obviously room for expansion in the fire type area as to which fire types get Lava Plume. While we're here, let's look at the Pokemon on this list that actually use Lava Plume. Let's start with Magmar. Magmar is an interesting Pokemon because it's actually not fully evolved, and yet it used to be. And because it has Eviolite, it has some niche potential in lower tiers in singles. However, it hasn't really been used in singles in the lower tiers because it's just so far power crept at this point that not even Magmortar is getting used in the lower tiers. So it doesn't really get used in singles. In doubles, Magmar does see usage because it uses Follow Me. And VGC players can correct for me if I'm wrong, but Magmar does not use Lava Plume because Lava Plume affects all Pokemon on the field, including your ally, and it would sort of not be the most optimal to have your bulky Follow Me Pokemon using a spread move that your teammate needs to now protect against. So unless you were running double fires and one of them has flash fire or something like that, probably not running Lava Plume is the main thing on Magmar. And you're not running Magmar in single. Flareon actually technically can run Lava Plume on a special set. Special Flareon with Lava Plume, Wish, Protect, and then Toxic. Although I don't even know if Flareon gets Toxic nowadays. Probably not, maybe. So it's not usually an optimal set for Flareon because Flareon's special attack isn't as good as its attack stat. But also, Flareon's not an optimal Pokemon to run. So technically Flareon can run it, but probably shouldn't. Typhlosion, despite being a strong special attacker, learns Eruption and would prefer to KO its opponents than to burn them. Typhlosion Hisui form is sort of in a similar boat. Typhlosion Hisui also has what was his signature move called? I want to say Sinister Arrow Raid, but I know that's not right. Infernal Parade. There we go. You know, they come up with these ridiculous names. Hard to remember them all off the top of your head. Infernal Parade burns, and a lot of times you use that as your ghost move. So if you're going to burn, you try to burn through that rather than going through for Lava Plume. I could see some argument being made to run it on Hisuian Typhlosion, but I do think usually Hisuian Typhlosion also would prefer to just KO its opponents. Magcargo does run it. Obviously, the weakness policy sets may prefer for a stronger move, but the Flame Body sets for Magcargo definitely run Lava Plume. So that's the first Pokemon on the list that actually runs it, because none of these other ones really run it. This can run it, but it's suboptimal. You never see Magmar, and normal Typhlosion and Hisuian Typhlosion would prefer to just KO. Magcargo does. Magby is not in Little Cup. It runs physical sets with Belly Drum, Mach Punch. Entei does not run it. It is a physical attacker. Camerupt can run it, and so that's the next one down on the list that you could see it on. But you never really see Camerupt. It's a pretty low tier Pokemon. And to be fair, so is Magcargo. Torkoal is the premier Lava Plume user because can be used in OU now that it has Sun. So ever since Torkoal has learned Drought, it's become the de facto best Sunsetter in most times. And it does run Lava Plume. So people know about Lava Plume, the move, even though it's almost never seen, because Torkoal does use it. Primal Groudon can use Lava Plume, but you won't see that this generation because Groudon wouldn't get stab on it, and so there's no point to run it. Also, Groudon's attack stat, special attack stat is not nearly as good when it's not primaled, so no point doing that. Magmortar in singles isn't going to run it because Magmortar is not ran in singles. It's a bad Pokemon, similar to Magmar, and then you don't run it in doubles either. Heatran could run it, but it has Magma Storm. So I actually do like Lava Plume on Heatran just because I hate missing Magma Storm. But you miss out on the main thing that Heatran is supposed to be there on your team to do. Right? When Heatran is on your team, you didn't put it on there because you like the way Heatran looked on the team. You put it there because it's supposed to trap something. And so if you put it on there to trap something, you don't fit Lava Plume and Magma Storm. And so unless there was a metagame that Heatran's typing was especially good, then you probably won't be seeing Lava Plume on Heatran. You never see Lava Plume on Armarouge. It prefers Armor Cannon. Cerulege is a physical attacker. You don't see it there. Chi-Yu, technically you do see Lava Plume from time to time on like nasty plot sets maybe, but you never see Chi-Yu in singles because it's banned to Ubers and it's bad in Ubers. So unfortunately, my favorite Firefish, and I do really like this Pokemon, it got banned to where it is no longer good. And I haven't played Uber's UU in a while, so I don't even know if it's good there. But technically, you could run it there. And then Gouging Fire is a physical attacker with no redeeming special attacking qualities, so you never see it there either. So out of these Pokemon that do run it and are regularly seen running it, Magcargo, +1, Camerupt 2, Torkoal 3. Heatran will count as 4, and Chi-Yu will count as 5. If you want to be generous and include previous generations, we can have 6 with Primal Groudon. So only 6 Pokemon run this move. So we'll just keep that number in the back of our head. Let's head over to Scald. So there's 3 Pokemon that learn this move by level up. Our boy Volcanion is right here. We already talked about Volcanion learning moves that burn. Of course, Volcanion never runs Scald because it has Steam Eruption, but that's just another funny little side point. Simisear, or Simipour. We talked about Simisear previously about it not learning Lava Plume, but Simipour is here learning Scald. Of course, that's fine. It makes sense that it would learn Scald. It's the generation that Scald came out. Simipour is the water-type monkey. I have no problems with Simipour learning Scald. I think it should learn Scald. I just think that Simisear should learn Lava Plume. Let's now look at how many Pokemon learn it by TM. Water types. We're not even counting these. Look at all of these Pokemon that learn Scald. I'm still in Gen 2. Scrolling down. We barely got to Gen 5 now. Okay, keep going. Gen 6, Gen 7. Now we're in Gen 8 now. And now we got to Gen 9. Poltergeist gets it by a special move. There's never been a Scald move tutor, but there's also never needed to have been a Scald move tutor because every generation has had a Scald TM. And look at all these Pokemon that get it. Next, let's look at the types of Pokemon that learn it. Mostly, they're water types. You know, maybe something like Galarian Slowpoke, which is like normal Slowpoke. So it's not a water type, but since it's basically the same, they gave it to it anyway. But just to point out, Slowbro and Galarian Slowbro and whatever, they get it, and they're not going to be a water type. We got Mew. Mew learns everything. Technically, Mew could have learned Lava Plume if it had been a TM or move tutor. And actually, I think that Mew with Lava Plume would actually be pretty nasty. I think that could be sort of a fun move to give Mew. But I can't learn it. We've got, there's a Galarian Slowking, Corsola. Galarian Corsola is a ghost type. We got Raikou. I do not know why Raikou learned Scald. I will take it though, because it needs the coverage. But not sure why. I guess because Raikou is got like rain clouds, and clouds mean water, and so that's why it learns Scald. But then I would think that usually clouds don't put off scalding hot water. So, not sure why Raikou learns Scald, but we take those. Azuro we're not going to count because it evolves into a water type, so that's not a problem. Castform learns it. Castform, that's fine. Although again, I will say, rain clouds don't put down scalding hot water. I've been in a tropical storm, but even that water was not scalding hot. Not sure about that. Emboar learns it. That's always been the one thing that I liked about Emboar. Sort of funny, but why does it get it? Not really sure. You could say that, well, fire Pokemon, they make things hot, and there's water in the air. So Emboar could make the water in the air hot, and then it could scald you. But you know who could do that? Literally every fire type. So why does not every fire type learn the move Scald, and Emboar does? Not sure about that one. Maybe there's some lore reason. Okay, continuing on, we got Stunfisk. Stunfisk is sort of like a fish. So sure, I guess. Except for you'd think normally fish wouldn't learn the thing that would boil them alive. But, you know, most of these other water types are fish and they're learning it, so give it to Stunfisk. Galarian Stunfisk isn't even like a muddy fish, it's a cave fish, right? I'm not sure why Galarian Stunfisk gets it, but again, we'll take it. It is somewhat like a fish. Dragalge gets it, not a water type, but it makes sense. Growlithe was a water type, no problems with that. Crabrawler gets it. I do have a problem with this one. Why does Crabrawler and Crabominable, why do they get Scald? Does that make sense to anybody? Not sure what's going on here. I know that they're crabs, but just because you're a crab doesn't mean you need to have a water type move, much less a special water type move when you are a physical attacker. I'm very puzzled about this one. Carkol and Colossal get it. Again, they're fire types. They can make the water and the air hot. But I'm pretty sure Colossal doesn't have water on it itself. This might be a reference to how, like in saunas, you put water on the hot rocks and it makes steam. So, like, what does that mean? Does that mean in the middle of the battle, my trainer is throwing water onto the Colossal so that it can steam it out and that's somehow scalding water now? Don't know about that one. Centiskorch gets it. I love Centiskorch, so I don't have a problem with it getting it, but another similar thing of why does this fire type get it and not the other ones? Weird. Pincurchin gets it. It's like a sea urchin or something, so like fine, I guess. But whatever. Just because it's aquatic doesn't mean it needs to get scald. And then here's the big one. Urshifu Rapid Strike. Why does Urshifu Rapid Strike need to get Scald? You already took the Pokemon that's going to be the bane of VGC, and you're giving it one of the best and most broken moves. It's not even going to use it because it's a physical attacker. But you're like, here, have this anyway. What about Urshifu says it's a special attacking water type? It's not shooting jets of water from its fists, is it? So is my Urshifu opening its mouth and hot water is coming out of it? That's a horrifying thought. But yes, Dragapult's here too on the list. I've missed that. But Dragon type privilege, I guess. Something like that. Here's a funny one. So Poltegeist and Sinistea, they are T Pokemon, and you would think that the Teapot Pokemon will learn Scald, but the Teapot Pokemon does not learn Scald. One of the few non-water type Pokemon that you would think would learn Scald. But no. Now, in Gen 9, Sinistea and Poltegeist come back out, and you say, well, surely this generation they will rectify that. No, they did not. But they did decide to give it to Poltergeist and Sinistra. Why do you think that is? Well, in my opinion, this is because Sinistcha does not get a move that Poltegeist does get. Poltegeist learns Shell Smash. And because it learns Shell Smash, and it already gets Giga Drain, I think Game Freak decided they didn't want to give it even more coverage moves. And so they didn't want to give it Scald, so that it could burn the physical attackers, get more weak armor boosts, and get even stronger. Whereas Sinistcha does not get Shell Smash. And so when its signature move already burns, you don't really have the ability to run away with the battle the same way Poltegeist does. I think that's what happened there. Just sort of funny thing to note. So, it's not like there are tons of non-water types that get Scald. There were a good chunk on this list. As opposed to Lava Plume, which literally only had Groudon, which is like the Pokemon that comes out of and lives in a volcano. So, Scald has been well distributed. But now let's take a look at the timeline of Scald. There's no need to go through which Pokemon learn Scald or that use it, because lots of Pokemon use Scald. So if we look at the timeline of Pokemon, there's so many Gen 1 Pokemon that learn Scald, right? Tons of them. Now there are some exceptions on the list that aren't here. There are some water types. It's hard to remember off the top of my head which ones don't learn it. But if you look up the list of water types and compare it, you can see that there are some that do not learn it. Let's see if I can get an example here off the top of my head. Let's go down to mixed water types. Yeah, Cloyster. I don't think I see Cloyster on this list. Yeah, so that's an example. There's one example of a water type that isn't Gen 1, it didn't learn Scald. So it isn't that 100% of Pokemon that are water type got Scald prior to Gen 8. But if we're looking at the list, it says something that I have to go and pull up the list of water types to figure out who's missing in order to tell you which ones didn't get it. Because most of these Pokemon do get it. Most of the water types do get it. And then of course Mew. Gen 2, tons of water types. Again, I would have to pull up the list of water types in Gen 2 to figure out who's missing. Gen 3, tons of water types. Probably most, if not all, of the water types in Gen 3. Gen 4, very similar story, although maybe less so. Let's look at the water types in Gen 4 to see if there are any that are missing. Maybe Gen 4 just didn't have that many water types. Does Palkia get it? Palkia doesn't get Scald. Alright, there you go. Gen 5 has Emboar, which is weird, and then it goes on through basically most of the water types and others. Then Gen 6 comes along, and we have a good chunk of Pokemon. Gen 6 is sort of a small dex. And then we start seeing in the later gens that not as many Pokemon are getting it. Again, I don't know why Crabominable gets Scald, but they start being a little more judicious with who gets Scald and who doesn't. And then by the time we get to Gen 8, they're still giving Scald to a good chunk of Pokemon. But then, what happened in Gen 9? 2 Pokemon in Gen 9 got Scald. That's it. One of them is a Suicune Pokemon, basically, which is Walking Wake. And then one of them is literally a Pokemon that revolves around T. I'm not really sure, frankly, now that I'm thinking about it, why Poltergeist even gets Scald. Because isn't Poltergeist supposed to be the matcha container? Sinistcha is supposed to be... Wait. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, and this is literally me thinking about it in this video, Sinistcha, isn't that dry matcha as well? It's supposed to be like mixing it up before the tea? Well, I don't know too much about matcha, so you'll have to tell me. But I'm feeling like Poltergeist especially is not just supposed to be the dry matcha. It's not supposed to be actually the tea version. So why does it get Scald? Not sure about that. Anyway, that's a side tangent. 2 Pokemon in Gen 9 learn Scald compared to all those other Pokemon. And then, of course, we all know what happened in Gen 9. Gen 9 made it so that if you import a Pokemon into Gen 9, it will no longer know any of the previous moves it learned, and it will be stuck with its move pool that it gets in Gen 9. And the Gen 9 move pools have been greatly nerfed compared to previous generations. So now let's take a look at Pokemon that used to know Scald, that in Gen 9 cannot learn Scald. To do this, we'll look at the TMTR list, because there's only one Pokemon here, and it's Volcanion, still learns it. And we will look at which Pokemon have a dash in Gen 9. A dash means that they are in Gen 9 and they do not learn it. So Blastoise, Golduck, Poliwrath, Tentacruel. Funnily enough, I do not know why Slowpoke doesn't get it, but then Slowbro, I can make sure Slowbro learns Scald. Galarian Slowbro lost the ability to Scald. Seadra and Kingdra, I assume, does not get it anymore. Feraligatr lost it, no great loss, but still did. Azumarill, same thing. Politoed lost it. That's a pretty big one for Politoed. That's like one of the few things it had going for it. Quagsire, I think that's a big one for a lot of people. The Quagsire no longer gets Scald. Galarian Slowking, yep, also lost it. Quillfish does not get Scald. That's sort of annoying for Quillfish users. Swampert does not get Scald, another big one. Ludicolo. Pelipper not getting Scald is really big. Obviously, Rain has its ups and downs, but Pelipper having Scald is always one of the better deterrents on Rain. Masquerain lost it. Whiscash lost it, for whatever that's worth. Crawdont. Feebas, I don't know why it learned Scald. I feel like Feebas shouldn't be allowed to learn anything, similar to Magikarp. But Melodic gets it still, so there you go. Kyogre lost it. Love-Disc lost it. Empoleon lost it, which is, big for Empoleon. Floatzel, nobody cares about that. Gastrodon losing it is humongous. Lumineon lost it. Samurott, Normal got it, lost it. Basculin, sure. Swanna losing it is sort of annoying for Swanna. Keldale losing it is pretty big. Greninja lost it. Why Skrelp does not get it, and Skrelp is the water type, and Dragalge does get it, but Dragalge is not the water type. That's sort of funny. Plowitzer lost it. Primarina losing it is sort of big for Primarina. Abominable, oh no. Okay. Toxapex is the #1 user that people usually think of when thinking of the Scald getting lost. Araquanid is actually a little bit annoying because Special Araquanid does have its place. Fluxius is fine, Redknaw is fine. Cramorant is actually fine because it prefers to use Surf. Bearskeet is fine. Dragapult also lost it, which is sort of funny. And then Urshifu, I think that somebody realized that there was no point giving Urshifu the ability to spew hot water out of its mouth. So, lots of Pokemon in Gen 9 lost Scald. There are still more Pokemon that learn Scald than there are Pokemon that learn Lava Plume. But Game Freak really reined in Scald. So now let's talk about why I think this is. Well, first of all, why do I think Lava Plume isn't well distributed? I think it's just because of the way it's called. It's called Volcanic Plume in Japanese, so it's only going to be volcano adjacent Pokemon and Flareon for some reason. If it had been just called, like, Boiling Flames or something, maybe it would have been more widely distributed. But because it has to be lava or volcano adjacent, I think that's what restrained Game Freak. But Scald is just hot water, and in theory, most water types could produce hot water. Even Pokemon that normally shouldn't maybe learn hot water moves still get it. For instance, if we go up the list, I was looking at this list earlier, and Lantern, I believe, gets it? Yeah, Lantern. Bottom of the ocean Pokemon, one of those Pokemon that lives in the very, very cold water, that gets it. Azumarill is sort of funny that gets it. Pokemon like Corsola getting it, that's fine. That's tropical Pokemon, that makes sense. Octillery getting it, Kingdra getting it. Those are more tropical Pokemon. Ludicolo getting it. These are all fine. I don't have a problem with that. But Wailord, Lantern, they live at the bottom of the ocean. Relicanth, similar thing. Empoleon is literally a penguin. Why are we giving a penguin a hot water move? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I think maybe it could have been a bit more judicious when they were handing this out in the beginning. And then maybe just because you're a dragon like Gudra, you don't necessarily need to have access to all of the water moves. Because why can't a dragon also create lava? I mean, there's no reason why it couldn't if we're going that way. And Scald to me is a really problematic move to be this widely distributed. Because the burn condition is strongly associated with the fire type. And there's not really a move for the other types that do that. Technically, Body Slam would be an example of something similar to that, where Body Slam is a normal type move and it causes paralysis, which, like I said earlier, is an electric type move and it's decently widely distributed. But Scald became such a prevalent move for water types and such a strong option because the burn condition is such a nasty one. It invalidates literally half of the Pokemon because half Pokemon are physical attackers and does chip damage. That it became the best in slot water type move for probably the majority of special attacking water types. Of course, you have Pokemon with signature moves, but if we're just going through the list and saying, are you a special attacker? And do you learn Scald? The crossover there means that it's probably going to be a good option for this special attacker to use Scald. Even though it's not very strong, it became a very powerful move. And the water type wasn't supposed to have this ability to just burn everything on sight. That's supposed to be the fire types doing that. Imagine if tomorrow in Gen 10, they give the rock type the ability to poison, and they give that to basically every rock type. And all of a sudden, we have rock types going around poisoning everything. That wouldn't really make any sense. The fire types should be the ones burning things. And yet the move that is like Scald, Lava Plume, is not well distributed among the fire types. And so in Gen 9, I think that Game Freak wants more variety in their Pokemon move lists. And so when you see most water types running Scald, most special attacking water types running Scald, you say, okay, this is getting a little bit out of hand. This move is too powerful. And instead of nerfing Scald, they instead made it so that only a few water types go in Scald. And you may remember as well that before the DLC, it was even harder to find Pokemon that learned Scald. It was pretty difficult in Gen 9 to get Pokemon that learned Scald just from the base game. I think they just want to rein in some of the more best in slot moves and make it so that maybe some water types are using Surf, some of them are using Liquidation, some of them are using Scald. That way there's different move varieties. We can also see the Game Freak wants to increase move variety because they're giving lots of Pokemon signature moves that tie into some kind of gimmick revolving around that Pokemon, right? They're going to give Toxtricity, Punk Rock, and Overdrive. They're going to give... I can't think of another example off the top of my head, right? I guess Walking Wake, they gave it Scald, but they also gave it Hydro Steam, right? Hydro Steam strongly incentivizes Walking Wake to not run Scald. And so in that way, they prevent one Pokemon that is a water type from running Scald. And so I think that they have been looking at their I don't know if they're looking at the VGC lists or if they're looking at the singles lists or what, but when most Pokemon want to run the same move, I think that's what they're trying to avoid. And so they're taking away Scald from a lot of Pokemon. But I do think it is a shame that Lava Plume isn't more widely distributed, because I do think that the fire types punishing Pokemon for switching in on a fire type, that makes a lot of sense, right? Scald and Lava Plume both, they're luck-based moves. The reason you run them is not because they're powerful. The reason you run them is because 30% of the time you can burn your opponent. And if your opponent is trying to avoid a burn, they shouldn't be in on a fire type, because fire types have Flame Body. Even something like Flamethrower or Fire Blast or even Heat Wave, those all can burn. Flare Blitz can burn. So if you're trying to avoid a burn, don't be in on a fire type. So if the fire type goes for Lava Plume, well, of course, that's your own fault if you get burned. But at some point, if every Pokemon can burn, that's getting a little bit ridiculous. And so water types being able to burn is sort of annoying. They should have other tools to mitigate setup. You know, we have moves like Alluring Voice, we have Haze, we have Encore, we have Toxic. If we distribute those moves more fairly, in a way that every Pokemon has some way of preventing setup, but not one Pokemon has all the ways to prevent setup, then certain Pokemon can prevent setup in one way, certain Pokemon can prevent it in another way. And that is what Burn does at the end of the day. It punishes physical attackers from staying and setting up on you or trying to break through you. That way you can be a more defensive Pokemon. A Lava Plume is also interesting, by the way, while we're on the subject, because if you look at the Pokemon that have Lava Plume, Flareon gets Wish, Magcargo does get Recover, so good on that. And Ceruledge technically has Bitter Blade, right? I'm trying to remember, does like any of these other Pokemon get any kind of recovery moves? I don't think they do. If something like Groudon had Morning Sun, it would use that in Veggies, or in Ubers, obviously. And Camerupt and Torkoal, similar things. I don't think any of these other Pokemon have recovery. Technically, Magmar has Drain Punch, but again, you wouldn't run Lava Plume if you were running Physical Magmar. Whereas water types that learn Scald, oops, wrong page. Water types that learn Scald, a lot of these Pokemon have recovery. Of course, something like Slowbro has passive recovery with the Regenerator, and Starmie has Recover. And then you've got, let's see, what else we got here? Yeah, Quagsire and the Gastrodon have Recover. Mantine has Roost. As the more recent gens, Ludical has Giga Drain, Pelipper has Roost. So Melodic has Recover. So you're able, and Empoleon has Roost nowadays. So that's sort of funny that they took away Scald just as soon as it got Roost. So a good chunk of these Pokemon Swan had Roost have Recovery and the ability to Scald Burn. Not all of them, but a good chunk. Toxapex. And Toxapex, Slowbro, Gastrodon, these are the Pokemon we think of when Scald is brought up because they're the most annoying defensively. I do think that if you took away Scald only from the Pokemon that got recovery like this, either through Regenerator or Recover, that it wouldn't be nearly as annoying, right? Tapu Fini learning Scald is a little bit of annoying, but half the time it doesn't even do anything anyway because it has its Misty Terrain up. And most of these other Pokemon, you're not even thinking about them learning Scald because they don't have recovery. So I do think that was another big problem with Scald. Yes, it can burn you, and yes, you're a water type and you're not necessarily supposed to be able to burn, but having recovery combined with Scald, I think that's probably the reason why Scald was overpowered and why Lava Plume is not overpowered, because there are physical attackers that want to set up on a fire type like, you know, maybe a rock type or a ground type. But you could technically punish them. But none of these guys, outside of Mag Cargo and Zero Edge technically, and Gouging Fire, but again, Gouging Fire is a physical attacker, have recovery. And so because they don't have recovery, they don't really make good defensive Pokemon. Anyway, just some random thoughts for me today on the subject. So that'll be it for me today, and I'll catch you guys next time.